Good morning. The City of Southport Board of Aldermen Budget Workshop, April 24th, 2023. It's now called to order. Thank you for being here. Thank you, staff, for being here. Thank you, board. Thank you, citizens. We had a very productive day Friday. Look forward to the same experience today, so thank you. For our invocation, we will begin with a moment of silence for the mother of Heather Hemphill. Her mother died this past weekend. And this will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and I call on Reverend Alderman Lowe Davis. Please stand.
Let us pray. Father God, we thank you for the blessings of this day. We praise you for all the gifts you give to this city. Today, we thank you for bringing us together to try to serve this city to the best of our ability with patience, understanding, and courage. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item D is the approval of the agenda. There will be one just short change that Tom Stanley will start off with us. He has one other item that we did not cover on Friday. And then, of course, Parks and Rec, Heather will not be here today, and Human Resources will not be here today. So other than those two, so I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So move.
Alderman Mosteller, second by Alderman Lombardi. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item E, we'll start with Mr. Stanley. Yes.
Good morning. Good morning. I trust everybody had a good weekend. Beautiful weather, except for a little bit Saturday. I believe Friday I was so excited to wrap things up. I saw food coming in. It got to my nose, and I believe everybody was kind of ready for me to shut up, probably like you are now. But anyway, one item I left out Friday related to our water and sewer system is our SCADA system. SCADA system is supervisory control and data acquisition related to our water vaults and our sewer lift stations that work all the time. What it is right now we're on a radio band. It's a private radio network, but it's not secure, which means the way the world's going right now, somebody could, attack it, and they can't turn off the lift stations. I know contrary beliefs think that there's a button you can turn lift stations off. It doesn't work like that, but it does control our alarm systems, our high alarm systems, and our power failure systems. Anytime that happens, we'll get a notification by text message that, hey, there's something wrong, and obviously we respond to it immediately. Also on our water interconnects, we have 3 water interconnects with the county. They're wide open right now, but each interconnect has a altitude valve. If something were to hack our system, those are the valves that could be operated remotely. And by that means they could shut off the water supply to the city. Chances of that happening, I hope, are a whole lot slimmer than our emails getting attacked. But, it is out there. And what this is a upgrade to our current SCADA system. It'll pull us off a radio system, get us to all cellular, and it'll be private, secured network. Our own network. It will not be able to, right now we're private, but it's kind of like a public setting. And also, I'm not even sure if what we're doing now is correct. Homeland Security may require us to be on a private network like we should. It dawned on me last year when I was trying to get some radios repaired, and our people who Dorset Controls, who kind of control our radio, or not control, but who are our technical assistants, they brought up, hey, you know, you guys are still on the 3G network. It's radio. We need to switch you to Sayer. And I think it's for the cost like $138,000 is what's in the budget. That's a little bit extra because the quote they gave me was like around $115 a couple months ago, but they're not sure if they expect, but they figured about a 5% increase. So that's what I'm asking for. I think it's a very important part of our lift stations. And believe it or not, our lift stations work all the time. It's just that the stuff that's in the ground is what gives our lift stations a problem. It gets more than what they can handle. You know, you can only put 5 gallons of liquid into a 5-gallon bucket. Anything more than that, it's going to overflow. Whether the bucket's got a hole in it or not, it's going to overflow. So is there any questions about this?
Is that already budgeted?
It's in the capital.
Is that already budgeted?
It's under our capital.
He said he had 138, but it was one.
Yes, it was around somewhere around 115, and
Yeah,
and that was like, I
115
think
was
David gave that quote to me in March, but he said, you know, I
Right.
told him we wouldn't be implemented until July. He said he couldn't foresee, but if anything, it'd be about a 5%,
Well,
5-7% increase.
Anything we can do to upgrade our security in that regard, yeah.
It is a
it's
security
marvelous.
issue.
That's perfect.
Budget, 138,000.
Tom, you made a
So-
statement that you weren't sure what the DHS requirements were for
Yes.
this.
Yes.
Then how do we know that the vendor that's trying to sell you this is the one, is telling you what the requirements are?
I go by subject matter expertise. You know, I brought up that because I'm not sure, you know what I'm saying? Plus, I figured it would spark your interest. So I don't know. I can't foresee a company that we deal with selling us something that wouldn't be proper. it-
We can't be the only one in the state that has this issue, correct?
I would imagine not.
So have we
Imagine not.
reached out to the county to ask them what they're doing, or have we reached out to the state to ask them what they're doing? I'm in favor of upgrading the system, absolutely. We know we don't make water, but the water companies around the country have been hacked, and toxic levels of chemicals have been mixed in with the drinking water. So I'm all in favor of that. But I'm not in favor of buying something if we don't know that it meets the requirements. And it would only take maybe a week. I mean, I'm willing to vote for this. I'm not against voting for it, but I'm a week to check out what everybody else is doing to figure out whether or not we're buying the right thing. We've checked the box. We did our due diligence, and we move on.
Well, my comment about not sure if we're up to requirements, I'm talking about what we have now with a radio system. I wasn't referring to this, but yes, I see what you're saying. I wasn't referring to what they were trying to sell us. I was referring to our current network,
Okay.
the radio network. Yes, sir. But I was certainly.
I would still like to see what
Y'all reach out.
the county or somebody else is doing, so that we're at least in lockstep with everybody else. And so if it's not the right thing, well, we've done our due diligence.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure, absolutely, great. One other thing that was brought to my attention, I got a phone call from Randy Jones Friday afternoon, just before 4 o'clock, about some boards that were raised up on the community building deck. He said there was a work order put in earlier this week to repair some. They said 2 weddings or whatever. So I go out there Friday afternoon, and yeah, there was 2 boards popped up pretty good on the deck, and it looked like it had been fixed earlier in the week. I mean, the screws were shiny. But what I noticed was, and I don't get there that often, I don't have time to run around and look at everything in the city, that deck is in poor shape. I mean, when I say poor shape, it is in embarrassing poor shape. I did not realize how bad it was, but I have reached out to a concrete company to get a quote. I feel like sooner than later, the big 38 by 62 foot deck on the back of the community building, not the elevated deck that kind of looks out over the roadway and river, but I suggest that we somehow put into the budget very soon to replace that deck. where there are hundreds of people on it during weddings or whatever events, because not only are the decking boards becoming in bad shape, but the joists that are below it, that are sitting directly on the ground, is where the problem is. They're rotting out. So I'm reaching out for a quote for that, and we'll have that to you before, hopefully the end of this week, but before the beginning of the month. Yes, ma'am.
Could we get a quote also for something other than concrete? Like Trek? Is that, Trex, so that we don't just, you know how I feel about this.
No, I don't. Go ahead and tell me. I mean, how do you feel about concrete and I mean, seriously.
I'm sorry.
How do you feel about concrete? I don't know how you feel about concrete.
Well, because concrete is impervious.
Okay. Okay.
Something pervious as opposed to impervious.
Well, I think they do make some type of pervious concrete, and I was also looking at for longevity and ease of maintenance, meaning that,
Will outlive us.
well, and I don't know a lot about Trex. I know they make the decking boards, but I don't think they make, like the big timbers that would sit on the ground, which is what the problem is now. The timbers that are on the ground are what's rotting out, so you can't screw the decking boards to it. But certainly, I'll look at anything you want me to look at, zero problems, but I don't think that the joist system is still going to be made out of wood, and that's where the problem is.
I guess my point is, can you look for other possibilities besides concrete? Something pervious, something in the way of other kinds of wood or fake wood. You look like you want to say something.
Just had a question. Can you remember when the community building was built? I'm trying to discern how long that deck has lasted.
Charles can tell you. I think there's a little bit of concrete under that, if I remember right.
I want to say Duke Power. Yeah, that's what I thought. But we don't know a date on that. Because I'm just wondering if it lasted 20 years, then.
We'll find out.
Yeah. I think that'd be helpful.
And Tom, I don't have any data on this, but just from observation, I believe the primary users of that deck are wedding parties. And in the late afternoon, when many weddings are held and people are sitting in the chairs out there, they're just going to bake on the concrete.
I've got something unrelated. Are y'all still talking about the deck?
I just texted Randy. The deck was added to the community building in 2007.
So, I just had a question about how did you pronounce it? SCADA, the SCADA program. I noticed on the capital list from the meeting that you had accounted for it in that. My question is, those funds would come out of the sewer enterprise fund, correct?
I mean, it can. I'm very leery of that account only because it doesn't have a lot of fund balance in there. So, I mean, you could, but that's just going to bring that fund balance. So right now, I'm recommending it come out of the other fund.
So just so I'm clear, all of that capital list was going to come out of the capital improvement. So the pier cross bracing was
Correct.
coming rather than Parks and Rec's budget. Well, we'll get back to that. But
Yeah, we're going
so
to be
the-
reviewing that budget later today.
the water meters, they're coming out of that. The lift station generator, do we have ARPA funds for that?
No.
So those are several big expenditures out of, for water sewer that we're not using the enterprise
Right, I
fund
mean, you
for.
can do either, it's just I get very nervous with that water sewer fund balance, because it isn't that healthy. It's okay, but
Any other questions for Mr. Stanley? Any further comments on concrete versus wood? I mean, if this was your, I mean, the community building is like your, like the living room of the city. It's like our, kind of like part of your home, just like the visitor center is. And if you had a deck at your home and it needed replace, repair, would you put concrete up or would you repair the deck? Just thinking out loud with you in terms of this lasted 16 years. Is that not long enough? Decking is what people are used to. Looks good. Has it served the city well or not? That would be a Randy question. I mean, he's been there the longest in that regard. Has he had complaints because of that deck, or is it unsafe, or is it the repair too difficult, or that type thing?
when I was there Friday night, Randy and I went out there. It has issues. It definitely.
Now, I meant over the years, has
Oh.
it been a problem? Not now, I'm talking about, has it been unsafe? Have there been falls? Has the city had to put a lot of money into it to keep it up, or is it better to go to a different product? So I think it's something that needs to be, looked into.
Technologically, I guess that's the right word for this, there are ways to deal with a wooden deck that probably were not available in 2007. I just had my decking redone, and the person who did it said, even back in 2013, they should have done this, but it wasn't available. So
Well-
now it is. And it will prolong the life of it for quite a bit.
Floors look so good now in there. Let's mirror in whatever we need to use on the outside as well.
You could certainly, I mean, I could stretch this conversation out probably till after lunch of what types, well, I mean, that's where we're headed. What types of materials, be it concrete, be it something like Kumaru or Ipe. I mean, hey, it is your guys' decision. I mean, I think the deck looks good. It certainly serves its purpose. When I think of something for the city, I try and think past what's been going on the past 5-6 decades and what I think we need to do moving forward. You definitely don't have to do my suggestions. When I mentioned concrete, I was thinking, hey, these guys can go out there, they can stamp concrete. There's so many things you can do with concrete. But also, you guys can go out there and pressure wash it once or twice a year. Done. No trip hazard. But, if decking is the way you guys want to go, I have zero problem with that either. I'm just making suggestions, what would look good or what would be best for the city future, or what I feel. If you want to try a different type of wood, some of these woods that won't rot, some of these woods that are super hard, but think about if you do, let's just for instance say you do like some big Ipe or Kumaru type exterior wood for the deck. Now how's it going to make the overlook look? It's not going to match. So I will certainly do whatever you guys want me to do, how you want me to do, or if you don't want me to do anything. I just saw something. I'm bringing it to your attention. How the board chooses to go forward with this is how staff will do. I'm just here merely pointing out what I saw. I didn't like what I saw. It's totally up to you guys to make your decision. I just want to point out.
And we
to you.
totally appreciate your proactiveness on it. I do.
If it was,
I
if
said
it-
we do appreciate his proactiveness on this, and I don't, we're not trying to beat you up.
No, I know you're not. If it was something, I'm only concerned because it's deeper than just the decking boards on top. It's just floor joists or ground joists that are underneath it. That's what
I
concerns
get it.
me.
I think to start with, I think we definitely need to get a price on just replacing the wooden deck and see how bad it is, I guess. Go from there. I would really struggle with doing anything. I'd really like to avoid doing anything other than replace essentially the deck that's there now.
And that's fine as well. Absolutely.
I think
Mark the
that's the way to
day,
go.
John and I agree.
Yeah, we'll put it down. Yeah. So no, I think that's good. I mean, we replaced the deck, but it's good to discuss these other possibilities. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. That's how we work as a board. And then we come up with a 4-2 vote or whatever. So we move, but not today. But not today. Not today. So thank you. Any further questions, discussion?
I just have a question. I'm going back to the whole capital fund where we take the money from. I know in the past, I believe we were able to borrow money from the water sewer fund and for a general fund purpose, but then we had to pay it back. I'm wondering if the reverse of that's true. That if we paid for it out of the general fund and we needed money, could we then be reimbursed for that? But because the enterprise fund can only be used for water sewer, it would seem, those restrictions are on that money, whereas the general fund is more fluid, that maybe we would keep money in the general fund because of the fluidity of it.
And I can very well look into that to see if we can, because I think what you're mentioning is a transfer to the water and sewer fund balance or to the general fund. I can look back on that and get back to you before May 1st.
Tom,
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna go way out there. Do we need a deck between the community building and the overlook?
Yes,
Why?
that's where the chairs are for
People,
weddings,
people,
parties.
people host outdoor weddings and events all the time, right on the ground, God's ground.
Can't argue with that.
So,
Meeting adjourned.
I don't know. I mean, that just comes to mind that you go to Orton where they don't have a deck that you're going to be sitting on. You have it out on a lawn. So that.
Grass there currently. You'd have to, it'd be a mud hole until you got something established. You'd have to stay off of it for 6 months and sod it and hope that it stayed alive. But we appreciate you thinking outside the box.
And he bring the board back multiple possibilities with prices and that type thing, and then we'll put it on the agenda for an upcoming meeting. Okay. Anything else? Okay.
Good catch, though.
God's ground. Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Thank you so much, and thank you, Tom, for
I'll
being
just
up there
start
as
keeping
well.
my thoughts to myself, guys. I know.
Yes,
That's their internal thoughts.
you look good. You're well shaped. Look like you're feeling well. Keep the momentum going. Let's not ruin it now. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Good talk. Good talk.
All right. Thank you. All right. We will go with fire EMS departments.
11 and 12.
I'll try.
Good morning. I'd like to start off by saying thank you for your support and guidance, also allowing me the opportunity to speak regarding the 2023-24 fiscal year budget process. I will be presenting today two separate budgets to you, the fire department and the EMS budget. The fire department has its own mechanism of revenue. By state legislation, a fire fee is charged for the entire fire district. The fire fee is set by the Southport Fire Fee Committee. which Mayor Hatem serves upon with a city appointee, Mr. Paul Fisher, District 3 County Commissioner, and their county appointee, the Caswell Beach Mayor, myself, and the County Fire Administrator. We review the budget and the process every year, and that fire fee committee sets a fire fee rate based upon the needs of the budget. The fire fee is based on square footage, not on property evaluations. So the fee does not fluctuate during a reevaluation year like we have had this past year. The fire fee is reserved for fire department use only by state statute. The committee met and reviewed the budget a couple of weeks ago and the fire fee for this year. Just to give you a little bit of brief overview about the fire district, it makes up 28 square miles, which includes a municipal district covering the entire city of Southport. We also have a very large rural district that is in the county's jurisdiction, and then we contract additionally with the town of Caswell Beach. The Southport Fire District has a population of 16,258 people, and it's estimated that during the heaviest tourist months, the population in the fire district swells to over 45,000. Southport Fire Department currently has a roster of 85 volunteers. We have 14 full-time staff members, and we respond out of 4 stations with over 5,000 residential structures and 600 commercial structures in our district for a total of 10 million heated square feet that we protect. There are over 105 road miles in the Southport Fire Department district. So when you think of the fire district, you have to think outside of the city limits of Southport. We do not just cover Southport. We cover all the way to Boiling Spring Lakes. We cover all the way to St. James. We cover all the way to Oak Island. 105 road miles in the fire district, and our current insurance rating is a very low 3. This department is committed to more than just running fire and medical calls. I proposed at the beginning of this year that our members would be more visible in the community. Customer service is not just a thing that we expect in a retail store or a mechanic shop, but customer service is important to me as the fire chief. We're here to serve our citizens. This department is about serving others and our fellow man. Customer service has been our top priority. This year we started our Seconds Matter campaign to push visible address numbers on all structures in the fire district. We've launched a district-wide campaign to make sure we can find your house or your business in the case of an emergency. We've also launched a new program that will begin very soon, our new Citizens Fire Academy. This academy that begins on International Firefighters Day, which is Thursday, May the 4th, will be great at educating the public of the overall fire and EMS operations for Southport Fire Department. We also began this year our EMS bike response program, utilizing EMTs on bicycles during special events and festivals in the downtown area to help cut response times and to be more visible for our citizens and visitors. Our department has been responsible over the past 12 months for installing 396 smoke alarms and changing 227 batteries in citizens' homes. In June, we will participate in a statewide campaign called Smoke Alarm Saturday, and we have committed to the state already to knock over 200 doors in our district, spreading the importance of smoke alarm safety and installing smoke alarms in homes that do not have an alarm. Southport Fire Department responded to 883 fire calls for service in 2023. We also responded to 2,136 medical calls in 2022, excuse me. That's a total of 3,019 calls for service in the calendar year of 2022, a record number of calls for our department. Our EMS division in 2,136 medical emergencies, they performed 668 emergency transports to a medical facility and 142 non-emergency transports for a total of 810 transports to a medical facility. In your handout that I've given you today, I'd like to first direct your attention to the first page after the cover, and that is revenues. On the fire budget, you'll see in the left-hand column, or the middle column, the left-hand column basically states what the revenues are, and then the middle column gives you the revenues in the fire budget. Our fire budget is based on solely our revenues that we collect and that we bring in through the year. So you'll notice it's $2,346,455 for this proposed budget. So the fire budget is balanced on that number. So there's no additional after that number in the fire budget. So it's balanced on those revenues. On the EMS department, it's a separate budget, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later on in the presentation. So a couple of things that I would like to point out regarding the fire budget, since we've talked about revenues. I just want to highlight a couple of things and go over the major considerations for this presentation or for this budget year. One of the things that we've been perplexed with over the last couple of years has been overtime because of our 24-hour schedules with some of our firefighters. So we had planned to try to move a couple of positions to salaried positions to eliminate some overtime. We are moving the battalion chief position to a salaried position, and we had intentions to move the captains to salaried positions, but we found out that we cannot do that because they're on 24-hour schedules. But by moving the battalion chief, it's going to help a little bit on employee overtime, but not much. The 24-hour schedules that we have to utilize in the fire department to have maximum coverage with the least amount of employees cause us to have forced overtime in those schedules. Every other pay period, employees, they have about 14 to 16 hours overtime. So that hits us pretty hard in the overtime budget. I also wanted to explain in the budget process where you see in our department it says part-time salary. That is where our volunteer members, we have one slot that a volunteer can sign up. Right now, currently, we have 2 full-time firefighters, 24 hours a day at headquarters, and we have 1 full-time firefighter, 24 hours a day at Caswell Beach. That person at Caswell Beach is supplemented by a volunteer that can sign up for a 12-hour shift. And they're paid according to if they have NFPA requirements, they're paid $100 for the shift, or if they're a certified firefighter with the state of North Carolina, they're paid $125 for the shift. Well, after we looked at that, $100 for a 12-hour shift is like $8.33 an hour. $125 for a 12-hour shift is like $10.42 an hour. So we're proposing an increase this year from 100 to 125 and 125 to 150 a shift for 12-hour shifts. So that's noted in this budget process. But we haven't put that in that line item yet from last year because we were waiting for you to review the budget and make decisions on what we want to do. The other thing in the fire department budget is we are requesting 1 additional full-time staff member. That would be a Monday through Friday employee, would be a fire inspector and an ISO officer. We are starting to prepare currently for another ISO inspection that will be in the next 2 to 3 years. This individual would increase level of service to assist with fire inspections and the insurance rating. We're requesting this additional full-time position in the fire department. The job title would be fire inspector, ISO officer, and the employee would work Monday through Friday and would be dually trained. They would assist with 600 plus commercial inspections and helping to meet all of our annual ISO inspection requirements from the state of North Carolina. So that's the other additional thing in this budget that is being asked for. I'll go over capital expenses very quickly. Under capital expenses in the budget, we're asking this year for 15 complete sets of turnout gear. We did get a little bit behind because of COVID and because of ordering, and we need to replace 15 sets of complete turnout gear this year. That includes helmet, hood, coat, bunker pants, boots, gloves, and gear bags. Also, with COVID, we have had a request from the firemen that we would provide personal self-contained breathing apparatus masks. This would mean that the firemen that do interior fire attacks would have their own personal mask in their gear bag instead of a shared mask. Right now, we all share masks. Now, of course, they're sanitized and they're cleaned, but we've had a request to have personal masks. With the COVID and the things that are going on now, it just reduces the spread of infection and it's just basically safer. We have $10,000 set aside in capital outlay for water supply hose because we need to replace some 5-inch hose on some of the trucks that have not passed the inspection this past year, and also $95,000 in capital outlay for the replacement of radios and communications. That's basically the big items in the fire budget, and I'll entertain questions before we go to the EMS budget.
Charles, I have a question about the fire district fee.
Yes, sir.
So there's I'm not even sure I can verbalize my question exactly, but there's a limit to the amount of the fee, and aren't we bumping up against that?
We're at the limit right now.
Can you talk a little bit about what that means and how we're going to deal with that going forward?
Yes, sir. So that fee is regulated by the state legislation. The county they have to request for the fees to be raised anymore. So right now, currently, we're at 100%. We cannot go any higher. If we were to go higher, the county commissioners would have to request from the state to increase it again. I have been told that the county commissioners are not going to do that until all fire departments in the county are at 100%, and then they will entertain looking at a different funding mechanism, is what I've been told. So it could be something different from the fire fee. They are actually talking about and entertaining ideas of a fire tax. That's not anything set in stone, but there are some ideas being thrown around about that. Fire fees work for us personally, but they do not work for somebody in a rural district a lot of times. They're the ones that are hurting. So we're at the maximum amount. However, this past year, even though we were at the maximum amount, we still increased our revenues from fire fees by about $60,000. So we got $60,000 more than we did last year because of all of the building in our area. So as building goes on, construction, new developments, our fire fees go up.
Do you think that, I mean, we're going to be okay for the next few years, the foreseeable future, which I assume is the next few years, you think, funding-wise, based on the current fire fee?
I think we're in good shape for the next several years, but I think if with inflation, if things continue to increase, I think that there's going to come a time that we're going to need some additional funding besides what we're getting.
And how close are the other fire districts to maxing out their rate?
Oak Island is maxing out this year, and several others are doing that. So we're getting to a place. I think there's maybe about 20% of departments that have not.
Okay. So at some point, more than likely, in the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to run into the situation where everybody's maxed out, and the county's going to more or less be forced to start looking into some other funding mechanism. So we're kind of just going to have to play it out. for
Yes.
right now. but-
That's exactly
that
what I
right?
see too.
Any other questions for Chief? Chief?
I just have one question, this may not be accurate because it says part-time salary and volunteer fire fees. Are those the numbers that we're going to change, Chief Drew, that you said you were?
The part-time salary, the 0100 would change if we do increase the 12-hour shift pay.
Okay.
The volunteer fire fees would not change. That's the amount of money that we pay our volunteers that are not signed up on shift that respond to calls. We give them a stipend of $25 per call that they respond to.
And that really speaks to the volunteer aspect of your whole system.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Could you refresh my memory on something?
Yes, sir.
So
I will try.
last year, we increased the number of paid firemen.
Yes.
And that, I can't remember where the line was. The fire fees did not cover all of those costs, is that correct? Or was that the EMS? I know the EMS part is separate, but did the new fire persons, whatever you want to call them, did the fire fee cover all of that? Didn't we have to chip in some money for that?
No, that was on the EMS budget.
Was it EMS? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Any other questions on the fire
I
side?
got one quick question, Charles, on the revenue side. What Duke Progress has what $85,000 combined between fire and EMS. Is that a grant or just extra money they give us, or is that a payment in lieu of fire district?
That's a donation that they give us every year because the plant is fire fee exempt because it's federal property, federal government stuff. So it's right.
So they don't have to give us that money.
They do not have
No,
to give us
but-
that money, but
But they
That's-
have been, and
that's
we're
awesome.
working toward, Chief Drew and I signed a letter to them, and we're working with them to promote this wonderful activity every year.
Yeah, this is
and
great.
continue that, yeah. And I think, when you enter the city and you see our fire department, and it is such a beautiful building, and the tradition in our fire station, Chief, with your grandfather, your father, now you and your son, I think it is a strong department, and certainly want to make sure that you have the personnel and equipment that you need to keep our fire district. And again, it's important for the citizens to know it's a fire district. It's not just our city. So when your trucks are out and that type thing, and the monies that are spent for this department, there's a reason for it. And so continue the good work, and we certainly look forward to your department meeting the needs of the fire district. So thank you.
I'm sorry, I have one more quick question. When do we know when the debt on the fire station is going to be paid off? Isn't it coming up soon, or am I making that up?
Coming up very soon. There isn't that much left. A couple of years, maybe?
Well, that's what I was thinking. So that should provide you with a little budgetary relief
Yes.
once that happens as
And
well.
One good thing this last year that come off of debt services, and that's one thing I wanted to bring up, it slipped my mind. We did get, our tanker is paid for. So that freed up $95,000 in debt services. So you'll notice our debt services went down. And we've distributed some of that money throughout the budget and to help with some capital expense as well.
You know how much you'll get when the firehouse is paid off?
Well, right, yeah, we pay $125,000 and the city pays $125,000, so the payment's $250, yes.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your service.
Any, with that debt service being paid, any thoughts on work that needs to be done there at headquarters to continue to improve the structure long-term? I mean, have you given any thought to that?
Right now, I mean, all we've had to do is just, basically routine maintenance as far as painting and, just small things. But I mean, our HVAC system is gonna have to be evaluated soon because this year is 13 years that we've been in the fire department. We entered that building in 2010, so that's something we're looking at. We've had a couple hot water heaters that have went out that we've had to replace. So right now, it's just been routine stuff, but I'm sure we're going to have some type of a maintenance plan as the building ages.
And that's why we want the money to do all the city buildings. Thank you for letting me say that, Chief.
We'll move to the EMS budget now if you don't have any other questions on fire. So within the EMS budget, which was separated into a different budget last year, we have managed to come up with $450,000 worth of revenues. The largest majority of that revenue source comes from our EMS department doing medical transports. When they respond to a call and they do get to do a transport, we charge for those transports. It is based on the level of care. If it's a basic transport, what is the charge, Paul? Is $350 for a basic transport. And then we get to charge mileage for transporting from the home to the medical facility. So if we go to Dozier, it's a very minimal charge. If we have to go to Brunswick, it's more, or to New Hanover. As the level goes up from a basic transport, if you have to do an IV, then there's a larger charge. So it starts at $350. In our EMS budget this year, a couple of things that I want to point out that we're proposing and requesting. Just so you understand, and I give you a little historical background, the current EMS system in Southport is a tiered system. Southport Fire Department runs an advanced life support level ambulance service, and Brunswick County runs a paramedic level ambulance service. Currently, every medical call in our district, Southport and Brunswick County are dispatched to those medical calls. The transport of the patient depends upon the level of service that's needed. So at the present time, it's anywhere from 8 to 16 minutes for the arrival of a county paramedic unit in Southport. The best level of pre-hospital care that we can offer the citizens of Southport, and we're asking this year to provide a 24-hour paramedic coverage. At the current status, we're just providing an advanced life care status. I've met with Brunswick County EMS and discussed Southport Fire Department increasing our level of certification to paramedic level, and they certainly agree with us and have given us permission because we're kind of under their umbrella of their system, and they agree with us going to a paramedic level. So with that, we're proposing in the EMS budget this year that we hire 2 full-time paramedics, and with the current staff that we have, because we do have paramedics on staff now, but they can't operate at a paramedic level unless we go to 24-hour paramedic. We'll staff a paramedic QRV, which is a quick response vehicle, that will respond to all medical calls with our ambulance crew, is one of the big takeaways of the EMS budget this year. I've got Captain Homick here with me today to help with any questions, because in case you have questions about transport fees and things like that. And that's the caveat to this request. If we do go to paramedic level, then that's going to increase our transport fee revenue from $300,000, because we will be able to charge more for transports. Questions about the tiered system or how things work, because I know it's a little bit confusing, and somebody would say, why are you going to duplicate services that the county is already providing to Southport? The reason that this request has come to play this year is because we have such a uptick in call volume, and we're noticing that our calls are more acute calls. They are higher level, requiring paramedic level. And we're noticing that so many calls are more serious than what they used to be. And with the traffic flow, with the county being, and I'm not saying anything negative about the county, by no means. They do a wonderful job. However, it's 8 to 16 minutes. Sometimes we've waited 20 minutes for a paramedic ambulance to get to Southport. You know, as the Southport Board of Aldermen, our geographical boundaries. We are at the end of the county. They're not going to stage a paramedic unit here because there's no response that way because of the river. So we're not in a good location geographically for getting a paramedic unit staged here by the county. They do have paramedic units staged all around us. They have one at Boiling Springs, they have one at St. James, they have one at Oak Island. However, those units are moved all over the county depending on call coverage. There are times that there are no paramedic units available in the county. If someone in Southport is having a heart attack, they're having a stroke, there's valuable medications that can be pushed by a paramedic responder. It gives them a whole new set of medications and treatments that they can give to the patient because of the level of service and the level of care that is upped. So that's why we're just looking to provide the best level of care that we can to our citizens. That's why we're doing this request.
Chief, I'm for this, but I do have some questions.
Yes, sir.
Understanding the demographics of Southport. The $300,000 figure, is that billed or received?
That's received.
That's received.
That's received. So on average, this past year, on a 12-month cycle, we were averaging anywhere from 21 to 23,000 a month on revenue for transports. So this year, we're going to bring in about 276,000, close to $300,000. That's why we bumped it to 300,000 for next year.
I just want to make sure it wasn't the billing, because
Right,
we both
no.
know that you don't get paid for all of them.
Right,
Okay.
right. That's what we collect. We get about 50% of what we
Yeah,
bill for.
that was what I thought was the number. The other question I
Paul, you
have,
wanna come up here? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'll wait for him.
Just that way, he's on microphone if there's questions and the public can hear. Okay.
So my understanding from you, at least that's my takeaway, I should say, was that on any given day, it's 12. That may have been your intent, but that's.
I think she wants to talk.
She always wants to talk. Okay. My question to you is how many paramedics are there in the county? 12? Was it 12?
Transport units?
Yeah.
There's going to be just added 3 that usually can't staff.
Right.
It's supposed to be
16
total medical.
now.
Yeah, microphone. You got to speak into the microphone.
Sorry, it's so high.
So there's about 16 of them, and they can put all the FTEs they want out there, but they can't fill the staff, and they can't fill the staff that they have now. So on any given day, especially at nighttime, there's a number of houses that do not have a staff to go with the unit. Is that correct?
Correct. Oak Island actually is regularly downed, and that's one of our primary units.
My question is, if we have the same level of care, are they going to cut more on this end of the county to staff the other end of the county because they can depend on you?
Well, that would be the goal. The goal would be for us to be able to. It would be a mutual response. The goal would be for us to be able to take over, plan our own sandbox, and able to handle our calls on our own, as opposed to them taking those medics away from us and us having nothing but what we currently have.
But you're going to get called to go outside of Southport.
Well, that comes with franchise agreement. So we currently aren't funded by the county at all on our EMS
Right.
side. And now, if we get into that, if we play into that, that will change the dynamic. Right now, we can kind of say, well, I don't want to go outside of St. James. I don't want to go outside of Boiling Springs, or Oak Island. We're currently going to Oak Island now because they can't staff the trucks and they have no one. And so we're going there to transport food transport.
And though we charge the person and that's for the transport, we're only picking up 50% of that. And so my question is, what's the county's position on giving us money when we have to run their calls?
Well, historically, the county gave us $36,000 a year to assist with EMS, but they cut that out about 5 years ago, and we get no funding from the county for EMS. Now, I've said something to the commissioners. I've met with the county manager. The city manager has been working on that. So we have dialogue going about trying to get some funding because, I mean, just think about the response outside of the city limits of Southport that we respond with our ambulance. We're covering county residents. They're getting a service from the city of Southport. So even though we charge, there's sometimes we go that we don't get to transport. So that's that we don't
Well,
get
50% of the time you're not getting, and
Right.
that has nothing to do with the fire department. That's
Right.
just the way
Right.
the world is.
So, but the dialogue is started. We're trying to work toward that. And the mayor has even, I believe, talked to the county commissioner, our District 3 commissioner, and there's dialogue going about that to try to get some assistance with that.
Okay, thank you.
Is two paramedics enough
Well,
for 24/7?
Paul is a paramedic, but he can't operate as a paramedic right now because we're not 24-hour. We have to be a 24-hour paramedic system for him to operate as a paramedic. We also have a couple of other paramedics on our department that would help to fill the gap if there were times when Paul was out sick or something like that on vacation. So what we have right now is we would set it up on 3 shifts, A, B, and C shift, and there would be a paramedic 24 hours a day on each one of those shifts. That's our thoughts. That's the most economical way to get this program started and get it off the ground. So that's what we're doing. We're giving you a base of just getting the program started.
So going back for a second to the situation with county EMS and our EMS is completely forgot what I was going to say. Are we? Never mind. I'll come back to it. I lost my train.
Okay, I'll help with that a little bit. So, no, we'll take a baby aspirin every day. It'll help with circulation. No. What Chief is saying, and it's so important, I want to make sure the citizens realize this, is that it's not just the calls, right, Chief? It's the volume that is presented to our town, the volume of people. The acuity coming to our ER now is higher. I mean, and so there are more patients, and they require a higher level of care. And so what the chief is trying to do, what the city's trying to do, and maybe we can, in cooperation with the hospital, to have a paramedic level here would lift the level of care tremendously. And because it's that call time, minutes matter. Chief's right. Minutes matter. Where they're even in the ER, seconds matter. I mean, we have time to discuss, and we can vote. We can take it back. We can get some more information. When they're on scene, they don't have that luxury, and I don't have that luxury. We have to make our decisions. We have to go. We can't go back in time. So to assess that patient where they are, right, Chief, and to be able to transport that information to us, in which hospital do they need to go, and that type of thing. And one of the things that would be good if the paramedic, not all calls are paramedic requirement. So to have that capability, and here's another thing, if we have patients that have a bed somewhere, like at New Hanover, but they don't have the transport, we could do those transports, right, Chief? I mean, at that level, and so that patient could get to a higher level of care sooner. So I'm excited about this program, and we'll look for funding, whether it's with the county, with the hospital, and see if we can. I think the hospital should donate. They have a foundation. They certainly could donate to this, and the county, in a collaborative, cooperative effort. And so I think this is an exciting program. But again, the volume and the level of acuity is up in Southport, and it's going to continue to go up. And we go from 3,000, and then we go to 10,000, and the summer's 30,000. So we have to be ready for that. And I think this is a great program, and I really support moving forward on it. Anything I can do to help, I will do.
Yes, sir. And the mayor brought up something too that I just thought about. Not every call is a paramedic level call. And that was the reason why when we sat down with the county said your ultimate thing will be to have a basic level ambulance and a paramedic in a quick response vehicle. So if the call is paramedic level, what the idea would be for the paramedic to get on the ambulance. But if the call is not paramedic level, the ambulance could transport the patient as a basic level to the hospital, and then the paramedic is still free for the second call or the third call that comes out, so that so this is going to give us optimal coverage as well and help with spreading out people to help with calls.
I like the idea of the hospital kicking in, because hospitals all over this country are buying helicopters for fire departments and paying the total fare for the helicopter, because the jurisdiction then has to pay the maintenance, which is astronomical, but at least the helicopter is free. And the the hospital fee, I guess, is going up 44% this year. So I think that fee is for fixed assets, if I remember right.
The fire fee is for capital improvements that cannot be used to operate the hospital.
Yeah, but
Those funds
it's
cannot be
basically,
used.
if you're going to get a 44% hike in that thing, you don't have to put this much money into that thing. So you can take that money and put it over here. It's pretty simple,
No,
mathematically.
And actually, what they're probably going to do is decrease the hospital rate, which they've done.
Oh, are
The
they?
county
Okay.
commissioners have that option. They've done that in the past. So, because I'm not saying they are, but they certainly have that option. But that money goes for capital improvements. In fact, when we renovate the hospital, we just did a small renovation. We took the old nursing center, and we now have conference rooms there, classrooms, that type thing, which has been a big benefit. And there's some exciting things getting ready to happen at the hospital. So, and that's where that money goes.
Can I just ask, of all that we're talking about for EMS, the budget for EMS is this something that is going to be reworked, or is this reflect what you're talking about?
Okay, very good question, because it will have to be reworked. The way we've done the budget this year is all the new positions or new programs that we're proposing are not in the current numbers that you see. So we would have to rework those numbers.
Going back, Troy, is there any other community, municipality, city, whatever, inside the county that's dealing with that same issue relative to us, where we have our EMS, the county's theirs, and going back and forth, and we're kind of helping the county out and not getting paid for it? I mean, are other fire departments in that same boat?
Well, Chief, didn't Oak Island drop their paramedic program altogether?
They did drop their
Yeah.
paramedic program. Oak Island dropped their paramedic program, and they just went. So basically, Oak Island has a total different response than what we do. Oak Island responds in fire trucks to medical calls. And some other neighboring towns have done that in the past, but I've seen problems with that for the simple fact, if you're taking care of a patient on a fire truck and there's a fire call, there's a structure fire, you cannot abandon that patient. You have to stay with them. So there's going to be some issues with that because it's going to start making problems for their ISO ratings. And so Oak Island dropped their paramedic program, but you've got to remember too, they have a county paramedic that is staged at Oak Island majority of the time. Now, it does go down at times at night, so that's one reason why that they done that. I have asked repeatedly over the years for a paramedic unit to be staged in Southport to help with response times, and I've been told no, because of our geographical location. It's just not conducive to their operations.
Couldn't the county have a stage, a paramedic base somewhere that would cover Southport, Oak Island, St. James, BSL? I mean, couldn't you have one centralized base for the whole area?
Well,
That makes sense?
They have a base in the city limits of Boiling Springs. That's base 5. Base 4 is right outside the gate at St. James. And then I don't know what the base number is for the one at Oak Island. Base 7 is down by the bridge. But like I said, with the call volume that the county experiences, those trucks move all over the county all day long. They go on standby. If the call volume in Charlotte is high, they put them on standby at Supply. They move them. So that's why sometimes we don't get a paramedic unit. And like I said, I want to be very clear. I'm not saying anything negative about the county. The county does a great job. I'm not saying anything negative about Oak Island or any other municipality. Everybody's trying to cover their calls and do the best for their citizens. But I'm just concentrating on Southport. That's my mind. I'm trying to come up with a plan for the city. So, and I feel like that this is the best plan that we could come up with.
I definitely agree with that last statement, but it seems like the whole system is a little squirrely, and I mean, it's kind of crazy.
Shortage of paramedics. There really is shortage
Well,
of
sure,
EMS
I get that,
paramedics.
but I think there's some real logistical issues and fairness issues involved that go way beyond that. I mean, it's kind of silly that we're, I mean. You know,
Who bills? Who does the billing?
We have a company that bills for us that we contract with.
Okay. And in the event that 50% of these people aren't paying their bill, what happens to that 50%? Is it forgiven? Does it go away? Do we have an opportunity to collect in some other way?
Yeah, well, so they do a three-tier collection. They do a 3-tier collection, and then they write it off. I just don't pursue it anymore. It's non-aggressive. But some of that cost happens with Medicare. Okay, they'll charge for Medicare, charge a certain base rate. The Medicare says no, it's not worth that much, and then they'll charge whatever they can. Or like VA or things like that can choose that I don't think it's worth that much money, and we can only charge for what they give us the opportunity to do. So we'll initially charge for that, and then Medicare, if somebody will come back and say, no, it's this, and then we have to accept that because that's the way it is. That's kind of where we're getting at. And then of course there are those who just don't pay at all. So or just only pay what they can.
Do we know what the percentage of zero payment is? Like absolutely nothing?
I don't know the percentage. I don't have a bunch, and I can acquire that for you. I think I can ask, but I don't. I usually just get what percentage base we get, and what we charge, what we actually get. It shows everything. It shows what we charge, what doesn't come in, what Medicare takes off, those kinds of things. And then I roughly estimated that actually around 47%, not necessarily 50 exactly.
So for my slow moving brain, the number you gave of 50 or 47%, part of that 47% is a reduced payment based on Medicare, Medicaid, VA.
Correct.
So that you do get paid, but you just don't get the amount of money that the others pay.
Right. So we have standardized charging, but yeah, sometimes it'll just get reduced on us.
Not today, but sometime in the future, could we work on breaking that down? Because if I go out and I say we don't get paid for 47% of our calls, that's not actually an accurate number.
Right.
It's
I can-
sort of like I go to the hospital, and the hospital has to take what these insurance pay you. You may charge them $4,000, and they may give you $1.25. And that's just the way life is.
Yeah, I can acquire those numbers.
I mean, this is not priority, okay?
No, no, but I can acquire those numbers because that's actually interesting. I didn't really thought.
I just want to make sure we're articulating
That
what
would
the
increase
what
our
the system,
percentage rate, I guess.
what it would increase your percentage rate of being paid.
Can I go back and clarify a statement that I made? Going back to the Oak Island question, Oak Island had a paramedic service. They were responding on fire trucks, but they were not transporting patients to the hospital in ambulances. So they would go to the scene, they would stabilize the patient, begin medical care. The county would come in and transport them. So Oak Island was not recouping any revenue for that. You see, the way you get revenue is by the transports. So it was costing them money, and they were not reaping any revenue from it. So I believe that had a play into why they stepped back from their paramedic program.
So for the cost of a ambulance, they decided to cut the program. If they had hired,
Yeah.
if they had the equipment.
They went out of the ambulance business several years ago. They sold their ambulances because they just did not want to, because they had people on fire trucks, they didn't want to put them on an ambulance to get them away from the island in case there was a
Okay.
call.
We cover Caswell Beach.
Not for EMS, just fire.
Do they have their own?
They rely solely on the county. Now, we have a first response system in Caswell Beach, so if there is a medical call in Caswell Beach, they page our fire truck, and our fire truck does respond there and starts medical care until the paramedics arrive.
Bonnie, before you go, you might be able to answer this. Sorry. Oh, well, maybe Dory can answer. Do we still, is there still $300,000 in this year's budget for EMS from us? I think that's what we did last year. Is that the same? Do we?
Last year, I believe we budgeted $180,000 for revenue for transports, but there was a collection of revenue from EMS, and then the city had to kick in the remainder of what the revenue didn't cover for the department, is what I remember.
Up to 300,000? Does
I
that
can't
sound
remember
right?
exactly what the budget was.
250.
Was
I
it
think
250?
I want to say it was 250, John. That's what I'm remembering, that the city was. That's why I was looking at this budget. It's 216 over and above what your revenue is that would, this, but then now it's got to be all reworked. So I don't think we know that number.
Okay,
And if you decide to go for the paramedic program, we're going to have to sit down and we're going to have to look at how many paramedic transports we would have to be able to figure out that revenue, because that 300,000 would probably go up some, and he may have those numbers, but, okay. So it would at least tell you how much more revenue you've got, if that's what you're trying to find out.
So in the beginning,
I want to make sure that we understand, and I don't mean to use any of the, I don't mean this in a pejorative fashion at all. I just want to make sure that we all understand how much of a support, contribution we're making to the EMS program, because I'm fine with it. I think we need to do it. I just want to make sure that we all understand it, that the citizens all understand it, that we are spending relatively good-sized chunk of money in order to make sure that our citizens have the highest level of ambulance
Yes, sir.
care that they can get. I want to make sure it's
It looks
very
like-
transparent.
Last year it was 180,000. That's what we budgeted for rescue squad fees, but we brought in more than that.
But that was the revenue that we brought in. That's not, I see what they're asking.
Yeah.
They're asking how much did the city contribute
Yeah.
and pay beyond the revenues. that
What
we-
is our subsidization
It was
of
250.
ambulance
I'm
service?
pretty sure Karen was correct. It's 250 because we had only budgeted 35,000 for the last few years, and you had to find other funds to pay for it. And last year was the first time, and I'm pretty sure you're correct. It was 250,000.
Staff
At the
could get
moment,
back
it
to us
doesn't
on what
factor
that
in all
is.
this
That'd be
other
great.
conversation.
If we go, and we're going to go through this, when we go to this on July 1st, you won't have the two paramedics.
No, sir.
You'll have the captain and the two other people who potentially could fill in if they're standing there to do the paramedic stuff, and we could charge at that point in time. What gives you confidence that we're going to be able to hire two paramedics?
You can answer that.
Well, two things. Well, a lot of local medics want to stick. They like to be in the fire service industry. It's a more sustainable job than the EMS industry right now, which has a turnaround rate. I think the county just staffed their things full time for the first time in almost 4 years, and then 5 left right after that. So in the fire service, because of culture, I think in my years of doing this, it is a more sustainable and a more sought after job to be part of a fire service industry, transport industry, as opposed to just an EMS or rescue industry. And it has to do, there are other staffing, administration things at play as well. Size, a lot of coming to a smaller town like Southport is a more appealing to personnel. I mean, it brought me here. There are lots of things that can.
Is our salary comparable or better than the others?
The proposed salary that we've put in the budget, if this is approved, would be comparative to Brunswick County. Would be comparative to their salary, yes. And other municipalities our size.
You gonna put together a budget proposal on the increased level of EMS service for us to
believe- I
consider?
believe-
Is that correct?
I believe we already have
Yeah,
that
it's-
ready.
It's in the personnel list I gave you Friday. Yeah, so it's in there. All of those positions that are on that list, you have to make a decision if you want to add them to the budget.
And I have numbers of calls and I have numbers of calls and potential monies that could come from it if you'd like. Because we had, I think, 100 as of this year alone from January to now. We've missed 153 possible paramedic transports that could have been transport paramedic.
Have the higher level.
Because we had to wait for the county to come and transport it for us. That's just since January.
153 calls.
And we've ran total of 716 calls so far as of this year as well. But that's roughly at the paramedic level, which they charge $825 for just the transport alone, with $11 on top of it, which might change with the next franchise. That's roughly $130,000 of potential billing money. So far, we haven't even finished out the year. So that puts it also in perspective, which that alone would more than pay for what the cost of the medic level would, it could potentially be.
We have I'm sorry, I can't keep the two terms straight. Is paramedic is the higher level than EMS. So if we have our own paramedic, would the county not send somebody if we were able to send somebody? Is that how it works?
Correct.
That's what we've talked with the county. However, this is the problem. At the current rate, we have 2 and 3 calls coming in at one time now. Used to, it wasn't like that. A 12-hour shift, you might run 3 calls, but now we're running 10 and 12 calls in a 12-hour shift.
Plenty of business for everybody, it appears.
Yes, sir. Any further questions?
sorry, well, I need to ask Bonnie a question, I'll wait. So, sorry to be dense, but so is the additional money for the paramedics in the budget that's reflected with the neutral tax rate, or it is not? It would be additional. Okay.
None of those positions are in fact, I'm sending it to you right now, the list of the
Okay.
personnel, because I know you have a lot of paper, so.
Thank you. Any further questions for Chief? Okay, thank you for an excellent report. Exciting times. Okay. Do you want to take a short break?
Well,
or
what I
you
was
wanna-
going to say is, while the chief's here, do you want to mention about the watering?
Oh, yes, if that was part of it. We have these planter boxes around town that you've seen with the flowers. The Southport Garden Club donated and maintains them, but the fire department has been helping with watering. They haven't started that watering program yet. The Garden Club has been watering. It needs to be done year-round and daily. And what you have in front of you, I reached out to the city of Charlotte, and they have a small truck, and they have unfortunately, it's gas powered. We'll look for electrical, Reverend Alderman. And this is a watering pump, a small truck, and they spend about 5 hours a day. They have an employee that spends about 5 hours a day doing their hanging baskets and plants and trees and that type thing in the downtown area. So I think we're at a point with the addition of 30 more planter boxes that the Downtown Southport Incorporated is willing to purchase and donate to the city. The Garden Club is willing to donate the flowers, plant them, and do the upkeep, but they have to be watered, and they're looking towards the city, and I think it benefits our city, and I think we should be responsible for the watering of these planter boxes and keep them looking good, because it promotes the beauty of our city.
It also includes the seasonal beds. So we have beautification plants, but they've got to be watered. So it's not just the planters boxes, but there's only so much that we can expect of our volunteers. They donate so much of their time and their resources that I think watering is the very least that the city could pick up with regard to that.
Yeah.
And forestry waters the newly planted trees for several years.
And that's, based on one particular member of the forestry committee, so it's not something that we should be relying on.
To address the electric option, and to just help, we can justify a green offset because we're doing it for plants. So there's some give there, right?
So anyway, dedicated equipment, a dedicated employee to help with this, I think would be a great way forward. Sort of like adding the paramedic program in a way. We're uplifting the care of the beauty of our plants in our city and that type thing. So I'd like for the board to consider this. Like I say, have what it looks like in front of you. And I think it's an important program.
I'm in favor of it.
Include that in our budget and work that in as well.
Would this fall under, where would this?
I don't know. Fire's doing it now, but I'm sure it's really a public works type of thing. I think the question I have written down, what's the cost to hire? We can't hire part-time people. That's the other issue we've got. Because right now, Tom's got so much to do with his staff, to pull somebody off 5 hours a day, it's a lot. So, I don't know, I got to talk to both the chief and Tom figure this out.
Thank you. Good discussion. Thank you. All right, would y'all like to take just like a 10-minute break before we go to development services, or do you want to push through? You ready? You good? Okay. All right. All right. We're good then. Development services is next.
That's budget 40, 40.
And good morning, Travis.
Go ahead, Travis.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, members of the board, good morning. Thank you. Let's start off with just who Development Services is. Again, it's myself as Development Services Director, City Planner, a permit technician, a building inspector, and a code enforcement officer. Vary one position per role currently. Want to touch on budgeted revenues real quick. For this past fiscal year for permitting, these are building permit fees. We budgeted $700,000, and we have exceeded that amount. So for this upcoming budget, we are budgeting $900,000. A lot of that revenue is based on one project that is all going to be coming online through the next fiscal year. That's Osprey Landing. You're going to be seeing a final plat on hopefully the May agenda, but potentially the June agenda, for the first 83 lots, I believe. And knowing how that particular developer operates, all of those homes are going to hit generally at the same time. So all of those building permits are generally, we're expecting those all to come in roughly around the same time, which means they'll all be running through the construction process at the same time as well. And so it'll keep our building inspector and our permit technician very busy. There's some other smaller projects coming forward as well, in addition to the ones and twos here and there that we always see throughout the year. Budgeting planning revenue is a lot more difficult. So we're budgeting $25,000 for this coming fiscal year. The way planning revenues work, it could be one project that none of us even know exists today, and it could come in with a $7,500 application fee, and the entire revenue projection is skewed at that point. But the big thing to note with revenues, particularly for building permits, as I know Bonnie mentioned this on Friday, permit revenues have to stay with permitting. Has to all come back to the enforcement of the building code. That is straight out of General Statute 160D-402, subsection D is the rule. And then we are also, and this is a new requirement, required to provide a report no later than October 1st of every year. This year will be the first one that explicitly lays out what revenues we brought in for building permits and how we spent them. So the state Department of Insurance is putting a lot of emphasis on how local governments are enforcing the building code and how they're using these permit fees. There are, as has been talked about multiple times, there are a fair few new position requests for development services, and they exist in two sort of separate priority tiers. The first, a second permit technician and a second building inspector. One, to help leverage that permit revenue that we're bringing in to increase customer service, make sure that we're turning these building permits around as fast as we can, and also that we're performing inspections in a timely manner when somebody is calling in and requesting an inspection. State law requires that we get out there within 48 hours. Ideally, we're out there next day, if not earlier than that. Right now, when volumes get high for building inspections, we're relying on part-time individuals who have been very helpful, but ideally, we would have somebody in-house, full-time, so that we can always be providing that level of service as opposed to calling folks in on a whim. There's also, and this is if we're moving to a proactive code enforcement scheme, which certainly seems like we are, 2 additional code enforcement officer positions. This would allow us to set up essentially a beat system where we would divvy up the city, and those code enforcement officers would hit those areas potentially as often as 3 or more times a week. So that way they're really getting a feel for what each of these streetscapes look like, and then they can see changes that occur. So it'll be very easy for them to take action on those violations. They'd also, having multiple positions would allow us to potentially flex some of their time. A lot of our, if you read the regulations of the UDO, if you read the regulations in the Code of Ordinances that the code enforcement officers enforce, a lot of them don't come into play until nighttime. And it's a little bit more difficult for one code enforcement officer to work 8 to 5 and then also enforce those rules that don't come into play until it gets dark. And then finally, a historic preservation officer / downtown planner. They would be designed to be the primary liaison for the Historic Preservation Commission. Chief's not here, so I was going to mention that, but a lot of the historic preservation work is not actually work that the commission is necessarily going to see. A lot of it is much more administrative, small things, replacing like for like with windows, replacing a door, that sort of stuff. It's not brand new construction, but it's all administrative work, and it all takes a lot of time, especially as we're getting the HPC up to speed, as we're learning more and more about that process at each time. At the same time, though, this person would also essentially serve as the city planner for the historic district as well. So that way, as folks come in, they're not having to work with a bunch of different people. It's a one-stop shop for everything they need with regard to planning, and it also helps building cross-training and capacity in case we lose someone down the road as well. Additionally, within the capital and improvement plan is a new comprehensive plan, and this has been talked about multiple times. It was also brought up at the planning board meeting, so I wanted to say a little bit about this. Why do we need a new plan? We just updated it in 2020, right? Well, that 2020 update is not a major update. It's not to say that those updates weren't good, they were, but the vast majority of the plan is still the same as it was in 2014, including most of the public input. Southport in 2014, Southport in 2023, it's 2 very different places. The 2014 plan is also just a CAMA plan. Nothing wrong with that. That's what state law has required us to do. But the plan is designed to check the boxes of being a CAMA plan to make sure we don't run afoul of CAMA. Of course, as we go through a comprehensive plan, we still have to check those boxes. But even CAMA itself is now recommending a more comprehensive approach and not just checking the boxes. There's actually a new land use planning guide on their website that just got published a couple weeks ago, if you're interested. And then additionally, state statute now requires that all local governments have a reasonably updated land use plan in order to enforce zoning at all. So making sure that we're keeping these plans updated is very important if we want to keep enforcing zoning, despite what Raleigh might be wanting to do with new legislation. The comprehensive plan is a long-range plan for the future of the city. It does, and they all do, they do have primarily a land use bend to them, but a comprehensive plan is also a lot more than that. It talks about how all of the different city functions factor into where we want to be as a city going forward. Of course, we're not going to redo the Parks and Rec plan that just got adopted, but that will get incorporated into this plan. The plan is also based more than anything else on public input. And we certainly know here in Southport that we need to hit on public, if there's one thing we hit on through this project, it's public input. But the plan is not, it's not my plan, it's not the planning board's plan, it's not the alderman's plan, it's the community's plan. The plan will guide every land use decision that gets made, not just individual rezonings and text amendments, but the entirety of the UDO should be traced back to that plan, the recommendations that are within it, because those recommendations have come from public input. Provides recommendations for future city actions, the same way that our budget request had to go back to the strategic plan. It's providing guidance for long-term actions, and it is the answer to the question, who do we want to be? Point to that plan and say, this is what we want to be. There's just a couple other notes. Our overtime budget is increased this year. The vast majority of that is because the city planner now generates overtime, and there's a lot of night meetings between Board of Adjustment, Planning Board, Historic Preservation Commission. Also, the forestry projects is moving to public services. I'm not sure if that was covered on Friday, but it's the money still exists. It's just within public services now. Yes, planting trees through the Forestry Commission. It was with Development Services. It'll be in Public Services in the next year's budget. Certainly more than happy to answer any questions you may have, but
Travis, do you want to mention the private company for code enforcement?
yes, thank you. Absolutely. So, as I'm not sure if the board is aware yet, but so we're going to be without a code enforcement officer for a while. So, well, yes, a week. We are hiring a private firm to help us in the near term, make sure that code enforcement remains current. Through this week, it'll be myself and Mo and Tori, and we'll make it work the best we can. But there are localities across the state, including a few in Brunswick County, Sunset Beach comes to mind, that they actually hire a private company to do their code enforcement efforts as opposed to having staff do that. There's pros and cons to each one. The company that we're going to be hiring is cheaper than one code enforcement officer position once you factor in vehicles, equipment, benefits, that sort of thing. But it's only 24 hours a week. So in terms of responding immediately to concerns, there may not always be able to do that. Now, some of that is where existing staff can come in and we can help cover those gaps as well. But that is an option that we have available to us long-term as well. There's a number of pros and cons to each one.
Is that a set fee, or do they get a cut of any penalties that they might have to write up?
It's an hourly rate.
Okay.
And with a not to exceed per week hour figure, and they do not get.
This is another jurisdiction that gives them a cut of every violation that they write, and that just encourages stuff.
Right, yeah.
Is our code enforcer going on holiday, or what? Why are we without a code enforcer?
Excuse me. I had sent out an email to you guys last week. He's just
Going back.
gone back to a job that he held previously with the city over at Public Works.
The phones aren't, on your phone it's not coming, if you have a computer it is, but yeah, it's not, I've got to do something so they come back on my phone too. I understand what you're saying, Alderman. So basically, if listening to your presentation, that you recommend 5 new employees. You're recommending for 5 new employees.
That's correct.
Okay, so we should be able to get someone to help water as well.
So,
Thank you for smiling. All right, but so 5 new employees, because the town is growing dramatically.
Yes.
And agree, we need to meet the needs of the citizens and of what's going on, and growth and development. I've said many times is probably one of our greatest, if not the greatest challenge that we have in Southport. And so the fact that our Development Services Director has presented a budget that requires this many new positions is very impressive. That and reflective of what's going on, not only in the county but in our city.
We probably needed some, if not all of these prior to this year, right? Like, this is something we've needed anyway.
I would
We
say
just didn't have
yes.
Travis to help us.
Well,
City
other
manager.
than the historic preservation planner, because the HPC is so new, yes, I would agree with that statement.
How much are we spending on the part-time building inspectors?
So
Do you know?
the budgeted amount is right now, so I'm glad you asked that. One, the two part-time inspectors, one was being paid out of other services, the other was being paid out of part-time employees. The proposed budget is reflective of both of them within part-time employees. It's budgeted as if it's 1,000 hours per fiscal year and not to exceed that. We haven't had to use them nearly that much. Let me see where the estimated would be just shy of $8,000.
Yeah.
The challenge with that is that right now, and this is just, in order for a building inspector to gain certifications, they have to have a certain amount of time doing those inspections. And Kylie he's gotten 3 of his 4 standard certificates, but one of the electrical is still probationary. And when you're a probationary inspector, you have to have a certified inspector on staff for your probationary to sit under. So Wayne Strickland is still on staff under his level 3 electrical certification so that Kylie can perform those inspections. And Wayne and Bill Bruce both being level 3 inspectors, if we have a level 3 building, we want to be able to provide those as well. Now, ideally, if we're fortunate enough to have that building inspector position included in the budget, we're able to hire somebody with standard certificates already, and the need for our part-time inspectors, as much as we appreciate them, goes down dramatically.
Are Bill and Wayne, do we anticipate in the coming year that they will continue to have availability to help us if we need it?
As of right now, yes.
I'm sorry, 1,000 hours equals $8,000?
No, the budgeted amount, we have not gotten anywhere near 1,000.
Oh, okay. So we were supposed to hire a full-time building inspector last time, and we did not do that because we couldn't find a full-time building inspector.
Right.
And then we were supposed to have our building inspector trained up with, I don't know that there was ever a due date as to when that training was going to be finished. So if we have to hire another building inspector that does not have the certificates to be a building inspector, I would hope the next time we have to do that, we actually have timelines as to when they have to finish getting their certificates, or adios, amigo.
Except it's not that easy because you have to do a certain amount of inspection. I mean, it's not like you can just say, okay, the class is on October 2nd and I'm going to take it and go. I mean, you have to do the work. You have to get a certain hours, and it's a fairly complicated process.
And the Department of Insurance also, those probationary inspector licenses they don't run in perpetuity. They have hard stops on them as well. So it's very easy to write a contract and say, if you lose your probationary certificates, then that's it for your employment. That's how we've done it in the past and other rules I've been.
Well, I don't know if we're not paying enough for that building inspector to get a real certified building inspector. I don't know what the issue is. Are we just trying to keep even with everybody else who also can't hire anybody? I don't know how that works, but I was not happy with the last go-around because we couldn't find somebody.
We never tried to find a building inspector last year.
No, it was before last year. The last building inspector, he's been the building inspector for a while. No, not in your tenure. No, before that. When we hired him, we hired him without the certificates, with the understanding that he would get the certificates. but I don't know that we ever were given the information of how long that would take to get the certificates. And Alderman Allen makes a very good point. If there's not only just the training, but there's X number of inspections, which according to you, there's a lot of inspections out there. How long should that take? We should have a more transparent idea of how we're hiring people and what our expectations are and
Well,
when
so
they're going to complete it.
Kylie's what, qualified? He's got level 3 and everything except electrical, and he's level 2 there and working on level 3. Is that right?
He's got level 1 and everything except electrical, probationary, but he started with nothing but probationary. He says turned building, mechanical, and plumbing, he's turned those into standard certificates. He's gone through the class, taken the test, passed everything. Electrical is typically the hardest one for anyone coming into the inspections field unless they're an electrician. So
I think it's actually set up too where once you have your level 1 certification, you're considered probationary level 2, and then you have to meet a certain requirement of a number of inspections or a certain amount of time, and then you can take the test for that, and then you become probationary level 3.
to go from nothing to level 3 across the board can take the better part of a decade. And that's if you're really sticking to it and making sure you're taking all the tests as soon as you're able to do it.
That's the first time I've heard that, and I thank you for that number because we were not given that number in the beginning. So how do we hire somebody that we don't have to wait a decade to get them up and running is my question. What is the pay that we have to do? What's the recruitment we have to do? What do we have to do to speed the process up? And for a few $1,000s, whatever that may be, it might behoove us to pay more than the guy next door so we don't have to wait a decade.
Not to count chickens, but we've got a couple leads already. Yes. Well, Brunswick County has 30 inspectors. Well, if they already have standard certificates, they become a lot more valuable. So if we can provide a shorter commute to some folks or something like that, then we certainly have the volume to keep them busy, that's for sure. So.
With regard to the budget and an additional building inspector, you said you're projecting to take in $900,000 in building permit fees. I'm using that, paraphrasing that. So, and you can only use that for building-related personnel and that sort of thing. So,
Enforcement of the building code.
enforcement of the building code. So, did you ever, we had talked about the planner for using the planner for the historic preservation. Would that fall under enforcing the building code?
It's not the building code. It would be a development, UDO.
Oh, it has to be like the state building code, or?
Yes.
Okay. Then the new inspector would fall under that.
Oh, yes.
And the new technician would be paid out of that. So is there excess of that then that's not utilized, or what does that all mean?
Well, the other piece of it is it also can cover my salary because I supervise them. And by extension, that would cover Dory as well, as she is my supervisor. So we're able to use it there. There's also some, we're going to have to make some low-hanging fruit space changes over there to help ensure that we're providing workstations for folks, but also making sure that we could still serve the citizens in an effective manner. And so that money can be utilized for that. And then for these inspectors and these permit technicians, there's the amount of training that they have to do to stay current or to go take the test it's a lot that they have to do. So it certainly also goes into that as well.
Are we building a tent back in the backyard to house all these people? Where are we putting them?
Well, for the building inspector and the permit technician, there's some, we've been working with Tom Stanley already, there's very low-hanging fruit changes we can make in there, in that, yes. The code enforcement officers, if we're proactive, they should be in the field as much as possible. So shared workstations, things like that, trying to maximize space, but they should be out riding the roads, being visible, looking for violations. And we'd ideally set them up to be able to operate remotely as much as possible.
Plus, when we interviewed the architects for the police and city hall, we asked them this question, saying, could you help us out in case there's additional people for like in-between period? And they said absolutely, so we can get Mosley involved in doing this for us.
So you said there were, this is a little, going off a little bit, but you mentioned it, 83 houses were going to go up in Osprey Landing. That's, my math is about $1.5 million in sewer fees, sewer, whatever you call them, sewer attachment fees.
Yes.
System development fees. Is it,
Yeah, you're right.
oh, is it going to the county? Oh, okay. So they voted, they came, they are annexing into the city for, okay. Never mind.
That is, it's just phases 1 and 2, so there's 3 more phases and almost 120 more lots that will be coming before you at some point in the future. They haven't even started really grading that part of the project yet, so it'll probably be a year or so.
I just wanted to add also, I texted Kylie, I thought I was right, but it's 5 or 6 years before someone can get all the levels of all trades inspections if they just push through all of them. So it is, I mean, the majority of a decade, but it's 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
Going to put it out now that I'm fine, you know, if we can hire a building inspector and truly pay for it out of the fees, that's fine. I'm not sure how we guarantee that occurs, though, is the problem. I mean, if we get to, you know, the end of the year and the inspection fees are not coming in as we thought, then the general fund's going to have to prop up that salary. So we just need to remember that.
It is very dependent upon market conditions.
Market looks good right now, right, Robert Carroll? So we can, not that we can predict a year from now, but it's pretty responsive right now and doing well. So we can certainly rely on that, at least for the coming months, and I would think through this fiscal year anyway. All right, any questions, further questions? Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you so much. Y'all are a very busy and growing department, and remember the days when it was just John Allen, right? And then really, think it was, and it was, you know.
God help us all.
No, and he was busy, but he was able to do it. And then all we had was Thomas for a long time, Thomas Lloyd. And so now look at where this department is.
Obviously, there was not as much going on back then as there is now. Let me just say that.
Absolutely. So we're trying to meet this challenge. So thank you for doing so. Is the administration?
Yes, these are like the littler counts, so I want to go through those. But first, I want to have Brandon go through all the revenues. That's in the very beginning of your document. It's like, it starts off with ad valorem taxes. May 1st, we're going to do Parks and Rec and HR at the beginning of your May 1st meeting because Heather's not here and Patty's sick, so I had mentioned to the mayor that we do that, so.
Yes. Yeah, we'll start with them on May 1st.
I was just going to do that, John. We need him to stay for it. It would start off, it says, City of Southport, account number 10-00-3100-1100, ad valorem taxes. It's right in the very beginning. You got it? Huh? So Brandon will go through those. No.
Three, at least 3 pages.
There's 3 of them. I didn't even hear you because is he coming back? Is he coming back? Yeah. No, go ahead.
Okay, so the first item we have is ad valorem taxes, so that would be the property taxes, which I think, yes, sir.
Talk right into it.
Oh. So that is based on the tax rate, so if we go higher or lower, we'll get more income for that, but right now we're estimating it to be 4.25 million. For the motor vehicle taxes, that's, most of these go hand in hand with the county, since they collect on our behalf. And then they take the fees out of that as well for them. Interest and penalty taxes, don't see that we're going to have much of that. That's mostly for anything that gets brought up at a later point whenever they do reevaluations for some of those penalties.
I don't know what he said to John. Just ask.
Ad valorem tax prior years is just if there is any amount in interim between that and the new fiscal year. Local option sales tax, we're estimating that to be 1.7 million. Privilege license and the peddler's permit, we don't really see much revenue from those. Those don't happen too often. Beer and wine tax is done via the county as well. And it seems like we're going to continue to go on through for about less than $19,000 on that for the fiscal year. Utility franchise tax, that actually went up higher compared to the previous budget. So we're going to keep in line with the 400,000 for that one. And then the interest earned, this is for what we get for the CDs or any of the accounts we have with the bank to get interest on that. And we're expecting that to be a large increase for this upcoming fiscal year.
Is the 5 million that's in there, or?
It's because of the interest rates
Yeah.
going through the roof.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
exactly right.
Right, the money we have in interest rates up.
Yes, sir.
That's great, that's good.
Yeah, and for that interest earned, we have that same amount going to all 3 funds. So the water, the sewer, the electric, and the general fund. So it's 250,000 for each for a total of 750,000. And donations, we get a few donations from families and organizations. It's like for the Neighbors for Neighbors, and the forestry has its own separate donation, but we get around the same amount every year. So that's pretty constant. Sell of fixed assets, that's usually whenever we put anything up, that's surplus, so we can't really quantify anything for the upcoming year. But I think we do have a list of vehicles that will probably be sold soon, so we can get that number for you, and when we get all that.
You talking about Sunny Point? That money has to go back into the water and sewer.
Yeah, community garden foresees to keep continuing at the rate it has been previously. The ABC distribution, that's actually jumped the previous years. They've been collecting a lot that we've gotten for the city. Now, the estimated actuals, that was before we received a lump sum, because they usually do it quarterly, but recently they've doubled up, so it's like 2 quarters in one payment. So that, I went and looked at that, that's actually close to $600,000 right now. Correct. So
You're welcome.
So we budgeted 500,000 to be safe, so it's kind of the middle ground between the 420,000 budgeted, and I think it's about 560,000 right now that we've gotten from the ABC distribution.
Let me just stop you
Yes.
and ask a question about that. So it would appear that we are under, I mean, I understand it, but when we're under budgeting that number fairly considerably, it would appear.
That is,
As well as frankly, the sales tax probably. I mean, well, yeah, clearly, because we've already, year to date, we've already exceeded what we're budgeting for the entirety of next year, correct? In sales tax, local option sales tax.
so for local option sales tax, you can only budget from what you've gathered or what you've accrued from the previous budget. So that is why it's at the 1.7. But we could.
But we feel
mostly
fairly
look into
confident
that.
it's going to exceed that.
We do feel confident about that. It's just they don't allow you to go over what your actuals is for the previous year.
So
in the
between,
budget.
between those two line items, there's $200,000-300,000 easily that we're more than likely going to bring in.
Correct, yeah, for the estimated actuals, that's an estimated figure, but when we get, we can try and get up to date on that for May 1st so that we can get more in line with it. And for the 500,000, that's because they did so well in the past 2 years. But if it keeps going at the trend it is, then it, like you said, it will be probably about 600,000, right?
And that trend, will continue. First of all, there was a lot of drinking during COVID, makes sense. But also with the new restaurants, I mean, there are 4 or 5 new restaurants, and the retail sales are just very robust right now. So they're doing very well.
And just so everybody knows where I'm going, I mean, I'm not the smartest person in the room, obviously, but where I'm going is that I very much like the concept of us trying to maintain a revenue neutral rate. It's obvious also, however, that there are some other worthy pressing needs that are not included in the revenue neutral budget that personally, I'd like to fund some of them. So I'm hunting for extra money. So that's obviously why I'm bringing this up.
Brandon, can I point out the $700 consistently for forestry committee donations? For anybody who doesn't know, that's Betty Timberlake's bequest. And until the money runs out, we're going to get that, and it goes toward buying trees.
That is correct, yes, ma'am. And that's only to be used for the trees or the arbor.
Do you want to hold the questions to the end, because I have a couple of questions? On the community garden?
Yes, sir.
All right, I see $2,000 proposed. What is that?
So the 2,000.
All the revenue comes from rentals of the space of the raised boxes.
That's correct. So I believe that is for what you get in the year for the revenue for the boxes. And then we have the appropriation of the community garden down below for 7,200, and that's the amount you have total, I think, in that account, because whenever
That we have in the account now?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
So they're
Okay,
appropriating all of that to the full budget, since I think whenever the community garden started out, we got about 5,000 or 6,000 when it came
Right.
from the county.
Okay, I just didn't understand that 2,000. Say that again, what was that for?
Renting.
It's an offset to the expenditures. So in other words, we're taking in that money for the actual lots. And then there's expenses is in, I think it's in Heather's budget.
I don't think so.
Well, it's in one of the
I
budgets.
think that the community garden is is self-sufficient. Whatever money we take in and we spend, some comes out of that.
Right.
Right.
It's got to be in somebody's budget.
Oh,
Right.
oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Weather, thank you. So for the weather tower, that is how much we have total right now. And this was as of a week or two ago, which it could have changed since then, but that's the total amount we've raised for the weather tower. Civil penalties is keeping right in line, so is the pet license and tags at 1,000. And then shop with a cop, they're foreseeing 16,005, and of course they have some carryover from the previous years that they may not have used.
And is that 16.5, is that purely city of Southport contribution, or does that include private individuals' contributions?
That includes private individuals as well. That's every donation they get for the Shop with a Cop program that they have. Golf cart fees are expected to still hold about $6,000. And so as well for the ABC revenue for the law enforcement at 25,000. We get anywhere between 20, it looks like 20 and 25 for a year for that. For that fire department loan, that was for the 2 trucks. That is no longer in the budget since those have been done. That account's been closed out. And then the fire district fees, Charles went over a little bit, Chief Drew, about getting that from the district. And then same for all these, so the Duke Energy, the 75,000 they're working on getting, and the 150,000 from grants that they get from other areas like Duke Energy and other places. Fire response fees are looking to still be about 30,000. And there might be a difference in the numbers because fire and EMS just transferred out the beginning of this fiscal year because they were part of one department originally. And the permits, they're actually seeing about 20,000, so double on what they had. And especially that can go up when if they get any other personnel to help out with that. But they did increase their rates this previous year, and they're working on something so that way they can recoup all of the permit fees and inspection fees that they might be missing out on, so they can be more accountable for those. Southport fireman revenues, that's pretty much all of the events that they hold to get any income. So all the drives they do, all the things they do with the community, that's where all that money comes from. And then since we separate our rescue, the 110,000 and 40,000 is from grants or outside sources that they're expecting. And then rescue squad fees are 300,000 that they're expecting as well. And if they go paramedic, they foresee more. Permits at the 900,000, 200,000 more than this current year's budget, but then, as we mentioned, it was Osprey, and then is a large part of that, and they're expecting that to continue. Planning and zoning fees, 25,000, Travis, and that's still to continue from that point. Then the city peer FEMA, they're expecting $220,000 for that. Rent and recreational facilities, that's mostly the buildings and renting out those, so that's about 11,000. and then 36,000 for all the programs that they hold over there at Parks and Rec, the before and after school, the basketball games and such. Community building is expected to raise 175,000. And then the local occupancy tax is roughly about the same at 220 or 200,000, 10,000 above this year's budget. And that's another thing that may increase, Mr. Allen, that you point out in the previous ones. We'll have to look, but that probably can get another 10, 20,000 depending on whether we received in between when we got these numbers and now. And three. Yes, ma'am. We might get about 10 or 20,000 more based on what we get for the rest of this year.
Can I ask a question about local occupancy tax?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a way for us to verify? I've had some citizens ask questions about, especially with the VRBOs and short-term rentals in our community, how we verify tax is being collected and being turned in and that sort of thing. I know that there's certain regulations around all that, and I didn't know if there was a way that we could verify that taxes are being paid appropriately and all that. I know that's not something you can answer right now.
Yeah, it may not be something to answer
That's a
now.
legal, that's really an attorney, maybe our attorney could rein in on that.
Correct, yeah, we would have to look into that. But there is a way you can monitor some of it, but getting 100% might be the challenge. So, yeah, we'll definitely look into that and see how we can enforce that as well.
What was that again? I'm sorry.
The short-term
Short-term rental occupancy
rental
tax.
taxes,
Yeah.
it's a very opaque situation. They're VRBO and Airbnb remit them back to the local governments. But my understanding, I know last time we looked into it, we tried to get some, really detailed information, and it was not available.
Doesn't
So I
have
don't
to
know.
come from them, but and they choose, the actual participant chooses whether or not they want those taxes deducted or not. So it's not.
Well, I think VRBO, it does it automatically now. You don't have, as an
An
owner,
option.
you don't have the option. They're just paid. But the county just
Everybody
gets,
chooses.
basically, I think it goes to the county and then to us. The county they don't get any kind of detail. My understanding is they don't get any kind of detail breakdown of it. They just, VRBO sends them a check and says, here's what we owe you, and there's very little way to determine the veracity of it.
But not
from what I
everybody's
can tell.
listed that way and doing that particular one, but you're right.
So, Alderman Mosteller, I thank you for that question, and that, I think we should put that question over here, and work through this next year, how we work actually with our neighbors to figure out a legislative thing, because obviously we got whacked in the head for just knowing that you had a Airbnb. You can't, very hard to track the whole thing. Now, I think the reason for doing that was a pushback because jurisdictions were limiting the ability to do it throughout the whole municipalities, and it was an overreach. So now, after another year, the legislators may be more in tune to, since we now have this process worked out, that we're able to now look into whether or not they're paying their taxes correctly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion, which I hope that Travis and his department can clarify at some point, because people don't know that a lot of people believe that our ordinance doesn't exist anymore because of what we did. So they don't understand what is actually out there. And so we've got people who say, I can do whatever I want to do. We've got people who are renting homes that were never permitted to begin with. We've got people renting homes that never paid occupancy tax prior to the new ordinance who did get permits. So I'd like for us to work on the conversation of what does this really mean? How do we continue to enforce our ordinance in a way that is legal and make sure that we're getting the occupancy tax, that we know where these people are, and that they're following the rules. Because right now, you know, I've seen a few just this weekend. I saw a home, that 3-bedroom home that is on the, you know, rental market, and can be because they got in a timely manner, with 5 cars in the front lawn hanging out into the road because they were parked in the right of way. Thank you, ma'am. So,
I think we're talking about the same thing.
Yes.
One, we have to figure out if we can figure out what we have. I'm not sure that we have the tools to be able to figure that out, because the legislature won't give us the tools. And so in a parallel universe, I would like to start thinking about how we go about asking our legislators to help us get the tools to collect the taxes that they set for us. That's my point. I fully agree with everything that you're saying.
If I could add just a little bit, we've actually met as a department about how to capture all the occupancy taxes. There are some fancy softwares out there that will help us, but I don't think they're going to be a lot of help for $10,000, $12,000. We have talked about possibly getting an intern or someone to help with this in the cemeteries. Lots of different things. But in the meantime, when people call the city hall and ask about short-term vacation rentals, I tell them we're not allowed to do the registration program anymore, but our zoning ordinance still applies. And I tell them how to follow the flow chart that's on the website, show them the parts of the ordinance that are still relevant, and that occupancy tax is still required. And I think realtors, for the most part, understand that. I mean, they seem to when we get calls about it. Whether they're actually doing it or not, I don't know. But also, if we get complaints and things like that of people that are running a short-term vacation rental, we would certainly investigate that. And I think that Teresa Jones is our tax collector for the city. She does send out notices, I think. So.
I asked you a question several weeks ago, and you didn't know the answer, and neither did I. A citizen had asked about getting a business license. He's interested in opening a store within the city limits. And so he had called City Hall and gotten, nobody could answer the question. So being a friendly alderman, I ended up being the one tracking this down. It's the state. The Secretary of State's office, and you have to, register your business there, and they then, it creates the domino effect of that's where your sales taxes are triggered. And then, of course, it comes back to the county and so forth. Surely there is a better way.
Just to be clear, the General Assembly took away the ability of cities to have business licenses several years ago. There are no local business license. You don't have to have one.
Theoretically, depending on what type of business they have, they still have to come to zoning to make sure that it's, allowed in that district. And of course, if there's any building inspections that are required, that's going to trigger zoning to look into it more as well.
Short-term rentals, didn't our ordinance require fire and health inspection every year or so? Certainly a health inspection for a B&B that's actually serving food.
Airbnb, yeah. Bed and breakfast does, but not short-term vacation rentals. There were requirements as far as parking goes. The emergency contact information has to be on the refrigerator or something like that, so they can know who to call if there's a problem, and they have to have it available. So if we have to call somebody, then we'll have that contact information too. With the registration program being taken away, it's kind of, our hands are somewhat tied as far as making sure we have all of that.
is there not I mean, when we voted to do away with the registration and give back the money, my understanding is we did that with the idea that we were going to create an alternative process that still captured the information and protected both them and the city.
That's the problem. There's not, because the registration's not allowed anymore, how are we going to capture that information. And I think it's still kind of new. The attorneys and the legal system still trying to figure out what we're allowed to do. But we wouldn't necessarily issue a permit for it anyway, so it's hard to capture what we don't know. Like to, but I mean, open to suggestions, of course, but it's hard without being able to have the registration program and having all that information. It's kind of impossible.
Yeah, I think that should be a priority. You know, that our attorney should try to address an alternative, perhaps along with planning.
The other thing is we should just check with our neighbors. We're all in the same boat, and look at all the rentals. I'm just thinking of Holden Beach alone. My God, there's thousands of those. So
Imagine
They
Wilmington
care,
would
they
help
want them
us
there,
out.
so it's a little different situation.
Modeled primarily after Asheville.
The revenue that you're obtaining now, these are short-term rentals that were registered when they were supposed to, and are there any newer, I mean, how would you know who's doing what if they didn't register? You wouldn't.
Periodically, somebody's got to go on Airbnb and VOBR and try to
Right.
figure out which ones they are and see
Right.
if they're ones that were, that got in under the deadline. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a giant game of whack-a-mole without really
is.
knowing where the moles are, frankly.
Right.
Sure, that'll work. Also, I need to remember that occupancy tax, I suspect a lot of that occupancy tax comes from the hotel out across from River Mist is in the city limits. River Hotel of Southport down here is. I don't guess there's another one, but I would be willing to bet a really big chunk, if not the majority of that, comes from those two.
All our bed and breakfast pay theirs.
All right, continue.
And as Alderman Allen has mentioned, it is kind of difficult because of all these different companies that have the rentals to keep track of it. I just want to state that. So for the tourism, the events revenues and permitting fees, that budget for miscellaneous revenue for about 12,000, that encompassed the fees they had for filming. So we made a separate line item for the filming fees. So that's why the budget's now 6,000 for the revenue, and then film permitting fees is 5,000, which is around what they got for the previous year.
What's included in the miscellaneous revenue for tourism? How do you,
So that is primarily their donations. So they have that donation box that they get the donations for. And that's they usually get about 6,000 every year.
That's from the visitor center.
Mhm.
oh, okay, thank you.
Can we put one at City Hall?
I don't know the answer to this. Is what we're collecting for film permitting fees typical? I bring this up because various people have asked me, do we get a lot of money for all the uproar and problems that having films filmed here do?
We looked at the filming industry here in Southport last year on the rate committee, and it is actually in line with a lot of other municipalities in this area. At your next board meeting, I think we haven't adopted it yet, I can't remember, there's an amendment to the filming ordinance that's removing the fees from the actual ordinance and saying to refer to the fee schedule. So I'm going to be presenting that into your fee schedule when we do that.
I would hope we're the same at least as Wilmington.
Give you an
It's the
idea.
economy
We get a
that
whopping
grows.
$100
Yeah.
for closing a street, a whopping $100.
It's the economy that the film industry generates for the state that is what, it's not what the municipality gets. They're not going to get a lot of money, but if they go to Northrop and buy a lot of items, or they eat in our restaurants, or they cater, or they use someone's home, that type thing, that's where the economy is generated for the different for our state, for the municipality. It's not for the city per se.
Continue on. The solid waste disposal tax is pretty much in line with what it has been before. The refuse revenue is going to go 330,000. It was budgeted at 286,650 before that. And then the PAL bill funds is 145,000 for the upcoming year. Now, we still have funds from this current one that will roll over, and we just found out that we can use the funds for the dump truck that was spoke about on Friday. So we are able to use that for the dump truck, which they estimate about 100.
How much are we rolling over? Do you know?
I think yep, that would be correct with all of it together. Yeah, I think most of the time they spent that is on the streets, or if they had to get cement or anything like that on there. So there wasn't much for this current year that they've used it on. Yeah, so that's what that, at the bottom it says appropriated fund balance PAL bill. That's the amount. The 217,041 is the rollover, and then the 145,000 would be for the next coming year. Yes, sir. So going into electric, it is, the sale of electricity is 7.7 million, so it looks like it's going up about 150,000. Utility sales tax, 539, so not much of a jump from the current budget. Everything else is pretty much in line, and then the interest earned, as I discussed earlier, that it's going to be the same for all three funds. And then the appropriated fund balance is 3.362 million. And for water and sewer, water sales are still going in line. Previous is 2.7 million, so about the same increase as the sale of electric. Tap fees went up a little bit. And the only major thing looks like it's the transfer from the system development capital for the 800,000. And everything else for water and sewer is just, it's just going in line from the previous years. And we expect the sewer and water development fees to go to 800,000 and 100,000 respectively, for a total of 900. And the grant revenue, that 1.263954, that's the ARPA that we received, that one lump payment, or the two different payments of a little over $600,000. That's into the water fund. $5 million is for the waterfront stabilization project. We're still looking to work on that. And then the capital project fund is what Ms. Bonnie, the city manager, requested, the 1.45. And then for a total of $2,043,000 from the leftover of unspent from this fiscal year, which is about $590,000. I know that was a lot of numbers, but if you have any questions, please let me know.
I have one. I don't want
Yes.
to take too much time on this because it's not really, it's about the budget. I don't know, it's not directly about this year's budget, but I just want to I've asked this question multiple times, and I've gotten this, I think I've gotten the same answer, so I'm starting to believe it, but I want to make sure everybody else understands it. I want y'all to confirm it. I don't know if you can off the top of your head. But the sales tax revenue that we get has nothing to do with the city limits of Southport. All sales taxes that occur in Brunswick County go to the state sends it to the county gives us our cut. We get our cut based on is it population or percentage of the assessed value, one or the other anyway.
Correct.
So essentially $1, this is I think a really important point that we all need to keep in mind, $1 in retail sales in Charlotte nets us the same money as $1 in retail sales in Southport. It does not matter where in the county it occurs. So it's kind of it's a weird system, and a lot of people don't understand it. And I think when we're talking to citizens and talking about the budget and things, we need to make sure we keep that in mind.
To clarify again, how exactly does the county divvy it up once it comes back from the state?
They can do it. The state allows them to do it two ways, either by population. So if you have 2% of the county population, you get 2% of the tax revenue, or they can do it by percentage of assessed valuation. So if we have $1 billion in assessed valuation and the county has $10 billion, then we're 1%. So you'd get 1%. They can pick and do either way they want to do it, and they do it by population.
That's what I thought. People frequently say, oh, look at all these people in town. Look at all these sales taxes we're getting. No.
It doesn't matter. If we didn't have a single business in Southport and all the sales that took place in Southport just got transferred out elsewhere in the county but still occurred, we'd get the same amount of money.
Value of a local sales tax.
It's not going to happen. The only other things we just got to do quickly, if you go to the board budget, which is 00, congratulations, your board budget went down around $20,000. You guys are great. And then the next budget is administration. You'll note in contract services, I put in a huge boost. That is your city attorney, because we are using him a lot, which I knew we would. I mean, so in the beginning especially. So I boosted that up quite a lot. And also, it's in the wrong line item. We'll have to move it, but $25,000 under capital purchases under $5,000. Obviously, it's not under $5,000, so we have to move that. That's for starting the process of digitizing all our records, which we desperately need to do. We have paper everywhere, and at some point, we've just got to start that system. So that's going to take a number of years, but at least we got money in there to start that. 25,000? And that is it for really administration. Everything else is pretty much the same. Brandon, finance?
So finances is pretty much the same in line. It's same as admin. Nothing's really changed. Now, oh, sorry.
Finance is
1002.
02. Okay.
Yeah, so the numbers are pretty much identical with the previous years. The property tax fees might be the only thing that jumped a little bit, and that's the fees paid for the county. And then the capital purchase under 5,000, that's just getting we're trying to get all of the finance software into one pot, or two at the max. So we're trying to get the payroll to where it's less number of resources to use than what it is currently. And that's most of the project for that. The 15,000 from the previous year budget was for part of that, for the equipment, which we're getting that set up for this year. And then the other 15,000 was if there was any way to get any renovations for the front, but it seems like everyone's waiting to see what happens with the police and onward to see about that. Yeah, besides that, everything's more in line.
That's
But
it.
If you have any questions, please let me know.
Why do we have nothing for unemployment reserve?
I talked to Melanie, and we've never really had anybody on unemployment, so we never budget anything, but we keep that line item just in case.
With regard to the digitizing of everything, is that something you're thinking you're planning for in-house, or are you hiring I know there's a service in Wilmington that you can give things to?
Go ahead, Dor.
I had reached out to this company, I think it was called RecordNation.com, and just asked them. They have a resource where they'll come in and do it for us. There is so much, and we do need to sort through it, yeah, to make sure we can't shred some of it. But the goal is to hopefully get everything at City Hall done first, and then start working on the storage we have out at Sunny Point. It's going to be a monster to take care of, but I don't think we have the staffing to do it ourselves. Yeah.
I just wondered if you needed more money to do it faster, that's all.
Okay, if you go to solid waste, it's account number 96. It's just one item. That's for $330,000. This would include, this is not the actual picking up of trash, because that's kind of a county service. It's in the county tax bill. But this is like brush bandit, dumpsters, all that type of things. Huh? What about recycling? That's, I think, with the county too. So this 330 is just for brush bandit and all that, so. For now we are, yes. Actually, it's been very quiet lately with complaints, so that's a good thing. Knock on wood.
Storms.
And then the next one you already talked about, that's Powell bill money, which is account number 20. That's at 362,041. And then if you go over, the only last ones is on account 50, we have transfer, the ARPA funding, transfer to water and sewer for $1,263,954. The capital, which is $1,450,000 that I'm requesting, plus we're going to have a carryover from the monies you appropriated this year of $593,000, so there is a total of a little over $2 million available for capital. Because a lot of the projects, like for street paving and things, it's where the sewers are going to be, and we don't want to obviously put have you pave the streets and then dig up the roads, because you'll be killing us, that's for sure, if you see that happen, as you should be. Part F grants, those are Park and Recreation, that's $530,000, and waterfront stabilization is $5 million, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is your budget except for Park and Rec and HR. That's all I have, Mayor.
There's also the funding, or the funds will be line items for the USDA project and the the merger feasibility study. There's just nothing in there yet, so. there will be line items for that.
They're just pass-throughs, basically, right? Can we get, maybe, I don't want to move on if everybody's not ready to move on, but I'm still a little fuzzy on a lot of the requests for new things. Can we get some kind of a very simplified that low IQ elected officials can understand that shows
I mean, this is
what the other stuff being requested is and how
personnel
much
and-
it is?
the
Yeah, the dump
personnel.
truck, like
Summary of all requests, new
Streets
requests.
wanted, I think Tom said he wanted 230,000 to buy the dump truck and 2 employees to do
Oh, all right.
street
Yep.
maintenance
Yep.
and $25,000 in electric fund to hire Ellie's replacement mid-year and new person at the community building, the stuff the fire department EMS is looking for. If we can get just a nice, concise, listing of all those so we can kind of start figuring out if we want to fund any of them and how we're going to do it.
It
So
always
did
does.
revenue neutral.
Pull out your tax bill. It'll get a little less persuasive.
I think one of the questions that I have is that none of those asked are in this budget. So what I would like to see is not just this request, but how does this affect the budget? So what is the
Well, every
actual proposed?
every $130,000 is a penny on the tax rate.
Correct.
So I mean, it's pretty. Yeah, you can figure
That's
that
how
out
you figure
quick.
it out. And basically, the way I've always worked it is that once you start deliberating, the end of every session, if you give us 10 minutes, we can tell you where the tax rate is, once you start making decisions. So that's usually the way I do it.
Personally, I'm really hoping, and I'm going to try very hard and advocate very hard for the revenue neutral tax rate. I'd really like to see us do that. I know we got a lot of other new needs and things that are out there, and I do support some of them and hope we can figure out how to do some of them. But I really think doing a revenue neutral tax rate's very important this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had someone call just this week about cost, and it was as it relates to electricity. And she was charged $350, if I'm not mistaken, to have her electric turned off to have a panel box installed. And I thought, that seems really odd because we shut off power all the time if people don't pay their bills. So I would have told her to not pay her bill. Wait, it would have been cheaper. So it's just this. So is that a pass-through fee? That goes right back to Brunswick Electric?
It goes right back to Brunswick. Actually, Chief Drew had that happen not that long ago.
So who turns off somebody's power if they don't pay their bill?
Every utility company and the world.
Logistically, Brunswick County
No, I'm
goes
trying
out,
to okay, so
takes the meter out, right?
So they come and do that for free. I don't know. It's just right. So it's those kinds of things that I wish we could.
Well, I mean, when you, from what I understand, when you agreed to take on BEMC, then the fees were explained at that point. Now, certainly, and I said this to Ellie, we can go out come July 1st and do a bid. Is there another company that can do this stuff? They probably can, but, somebody said, well, that's going to be controversial. I said, but you might as well just find out what other companies could do for us. Can't hurt.
Robert, just as a point of that, I had to have a panel box changed out on Oak Island not too long ago, and part of what you're paying for is the certainty of the service. They're going to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning and do the disconnect so the electrician can do his work, and they more or less guarantee you they're going to come back that afternoon and hook it all back up so you get your power back on. It's a different, it essentially, it sort of does the same thing, but it's a very different process, I guess.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. I think that we just need to find ways to continue to make Southport a place that everyone can afford to live. And not everyone can afford to live here, but people are you know, calling all the time about, you know, the higher tax rates, the higher utility rates that we're charging. So is there a way to do what you're saying and provide some of these extra asks while, you know, keeping it revenue neutral?
Thank you for the struggle and for that good suggestion, though, about the summarizing employees and monies and that type thing that they're asking for, so we can have a better idea for this budget. Our last item is the, and I'll call on the city manager, authorization of finance officers.
Melanie's last day, and we need to get signatures for Paul and Brandon to start signing checks and things like that. And I can't wait till May 11th at your next meeting, so I asked the mayor if you would vote on that today, because they need to have something from the Board of Aldermen that you are authorizing them to be signatures. So that's what I'm asking.
Can we do that?
Yes, yeah, we can. We normally don't vote at a workshop, but we made this exception for today because they need to do their job. I mean, it's Melanie's last day, so it's done in public, it's transparent, they're already working. It's not something that affects the citizens. Yeah, no, it's just giving them the authority to be able to sign checks because today's Melanie's last day. And I felt like for something like that, it's not like we're selling a piece of land today in voting. So, and normally we do not vote at workshops, but the city manager and I talked about it, and we're going to make that exception today. So, yeah.
The reason why we don't vote at workshops has nothing to do with whether or not we can't vote.
We can.
There's no legal
It's just we
issue.
don't.
It's just we choose not to as a group.
Yeah, I've just chosen not to vote at workshops because, you know, how many citizens are here right now? So, I mean, it just,
The only
you
question,
know, I mean, you know, so we,
this should be a slam dunk, and we should be able to do it.
Yeah.
But my question is, don't you have to announce, like post 2 days before we have a meeting that we vote on something?
no.
So there's a meeting, you don't have to, I mean, you can list what you're talking about, you're supposed to, but it's just a budget workshop, and that's fine, because this is finance officers. And it's on the agenda.
Okay, I just, obviously, we need to do something, though this didn't catch us by surprise that she was leaving, but let's do it as long as it's legal.
Motion that we add Paul Gross and Brandon, give me your last name, I can't remember, I'm sorry, Brandon Stevens, to the list of employees authorized to sign checks on behalf of the city.
Second.
A motion by Alderman Allen, a second by Alderman Carroll. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carried unanimously. Thank you. So, all right, get to sign those checks. Get those employees. That's right, especially Alderman Allen. All right.
I've got some, I think, large commission checks coming my way, so I want to make sure they get done.
So this has been an excellent meeting today. We'll go with board comments. Alderman Allen, Alderman Carroll, Alderman Davis, Alderman Alt.
I'm going to echo what Alderman Allen said. I'm very behind revenue neutral, and I'm sorry that probably means that the staff recommendations, I'll channel the manager for a moment. We can go against staff recommendations, and the world's not going to come to an end. I'm going to review all of them again. I'm going to look at them again, but I'm not sure that we can do them all this time around.
Mayor Pro Tem. Alderman Lombardi. Okay, thank you. This has been a excellent workshop. Thank you all for being here today. I feel like we're moving our city forward. Budget is a tough time, but if we go step by step, line by line, we certainly will get there. I want to thank the staff. Thank you, City Manager Bonnie Theron. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for putting all this together, and all our city department heads. Thank you for streaming the meeting today, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? All Motion carried. Adjourned.